single biggest challenge is the breaking of the connection between the students and the teacher. Even Zoom or one of those video conferencing pieces of software imposes a lot of distance. We take for granted, in a way that you only understand when you lose it, the physical proximity and the incredible amounts of information that we can gather from each other just intuitively. Teaching is a physical act. It is an intuitive, emotional act. You're in a room with people and you use your entire intelligence to make a connection. And it's possible to do that with 2 students, with 15, or even with 400. It's just different techniques. The challenge of the current moment is, how can you use software and technology to attempt to get that back? If you have a course that has 400 people in it, there are just physical realities versus a small seminar or a hands-on instruction like a lab or something. So in the huge category, like in the 400 plus category, I think the best practice is to assume that you can't really expect the world's internet infrastructure to allow you to gather 400 people in a kind of virtual lecture hall. So I've made the decision to go asynchronous, so that I am going to attempt to take what I do on the stage of Schoenberg and break it up into a series of videos that the students can download and then watch. You have to really think about the size of the class and what's realistic for your students. That's point one. And I have tended to make changes that make the class more robust. So you don't assume that all the students can show up at the same time. I mean, UCLA is a huge university and my class is large, so I have students who are now all over the world. So they're not even in the same time zone or even day for night. Secondly, I think what my teaching assistants and I have figured out is that we're going to have to work extra hard to get feedback from the students, because some of the easy back and forth that happens when people are in the same room, and even for me, just the feeling of the whole group of the students when I'm doing a lecture, I can sort of tell in the way that a comedian reads the crowd, or musicians can tell whether something is working, whether learning is happening. Now that channel is broken, so you need to actually make new channels. And we're going to be trying to use all of the technology tools that our course management software has to get more feedback from the students. And we're going to probably change some of the way that we do section, maybe to emphasize students coming in and doing things for the TAs, rather than having that be a kind of group discussion. We are going to do that too, but it may be more that students will make little videos, or they will come in one-on-one to the online video meetings and actually do something. So there can be short, focused moments of connection, rather than sort of hanging out in a looser and more passive way. Those are 2 things that I think are really important. I think also I'm going to make myself more available in an unstructured way on the internet. Normally I put all my energy into the lecturing, but I want to try to be more available. If you look in the history of electronic dance music, because of its history coming out of the 1980s and out of underground communities that are largely communities of color and often queer communities, those communities are familiar with what it's like to not be able to go out or to come out of their places. They're also familiar with what it feels like to have disease and illness stalking your community and to feel under threat. And so it wasn't that hard for me to put together a playlist, and it won't be that hard for anyone else to put together a playlist of classic house, techno, and other kinds of dance music tracks, which explicitly deal with coming together in times of crisis, with living through this, with being a community, with finding some way to deal with struggle and oppression and sadness and grief, and somehow believing in the power of the human body and spirit to prevail. Electronic dance music, in its broadest sense, is a kind of cultural ritual that really comes out of deep cultural traditions that go back in many times to Africa, where people use dance and music together as a way to actually prepare people for life. And they imagine that kind of rhythmic practice as building character, building what they call courage or intrepidity to deal with whatever life throws at you. And so time and again, and it's not just electronic, this is really the dance music part, you find that although people think of dance music in a way as about frivolous entertainment, or maybe even about social deviance, where it really has counted for people, it's actually good for you. It brings people together, and not only brings them together, but puts them in rhythm with each other, which makes them empowered, right? So I teach about dance music as a way to create community in the face of sometimes it's oppression, sometimes it is the kind of dehumanizing aspects of modern society. But yeah, I mean, if you needed it before, you need it more now.